all of us. Thank you. Senator Manchin.
I also agree. Let me just say this. The fiscal year 21 omnibus bill appropriated $1.9 billion to carry out the Secured and Trusted Communications Networks reimbursements program, which is also known as a rip and replace program.
Yes.
For all the people that we say are out there that we got to get them off those services. Where do you stand on that? What are then some security implications that we're not fully aware of?
Well, there's insecure Chinese equipment in many of our nation's smallest wireless carriers. And Congress provided us with $1.9 billion to take it out so they could replace it.
Right.
But as I've told the authorizing committees, we need an additional $3.08 billion to fully take that equipment out.
We're paying for all of it. The federal government's paying to reimburse those who were led to believe this is safe and secure and it's cheaper.
That's exactly right. I think we've decided that this equipment is insecure, and we need to take it out at all costs. And the smallest carriers have it in their networks with the least resources and the fewest customers. Okay. So Congress set aside funding for it.
Madam Chairwoman, then talk to me about your FCC's budget for 24.
Yeah, our budget
Is it in there? Is your request in there?
Our request is not part of our budget because it was part. I think that funding was set aside in a defense authorization bill.
The reason I'm saying that, everything we're talking about is extremely important. That was one of the most offensive things that we had found out about, all the different users that we had using something that could be detrimental to all of us and our security.
Yeah.
So to me, that would be a high priority. That I think if you don't identify it, I can guarantee you, they won't come forward and just say, oh, yeah, we still think that's needed, but it must not be your highest priority because it's not in your budget request.
Well, I've written to members of Congress on this on 5 or 6 different separate occasions asking to be able to have this funding made available. So we have made it a priority, and we're working with the carriers that have it in their networks right now to try to identify a way forward.
What's your highest priorities right now within your budget request as far as the mission of the FCC?
I think we've got to make sure that we figure out a way to get broadband to everyone in this country. We've got to make sure that our maps can actually be accurate and help with that process. We've got to make sure that wireless services reach everyone and that we get our spectrum authorities back.
How do you in rural areas such as mine and Louisiana and Tennessee and on and on and on, Maryland even has some rural areas that I'm very familiar with. How do we make sure that the carriers who have exclusive rights in those areas, who've had rights and have told us everything and the maps have been totally erroneous, or maps and they protect their territory, how can we make sure that they're doing what's needed? I had a person call me today, 1/2 mile from where Frontier was going, 8 homes down over and they won't come.
Yeah. No, we hear stories like that all the time. Yeah. What we are trying to do with our maps, and this is a process, it's not something that happens overnight, is we build the kind of database where consumers, states, and municipalities can come to us and say, this information's not right. I live here, and in my own backyard, let me tell you, you've got it wrong, or what the carriers are telling you isn't right. And I think we've been working with the West Virginia Broadband Office to do a lot of that work, and a lot of state broadband offices have really stepped up to help us understand where our data is right and where it's wrong. And I just got to tell you, we're going to have to commit to that process for the long haul to make sure that things like those BEAD monies that are being spent right now get spent in the right places.
Are you able to have enough resources to do the mapping and making sure the maps are accurate and followed as we designed?
We do right now, but in the next fiscal year, we'll have to ask for an additional appropriation to keep those maps up and running and continue to improve them.
My recommendation would be, based on what we talked with the Huawei's and all the concerns we had that we just mentioned, that be a high priority of yours to ask in your budget, and
yes,
also for the additional on this, because just in common sense, I tell people back home, and they remember their grandparents or great-grandparents talking about, and they had no electricity. In 1936, we had rural broadband electrification. I could never figure how we got into so many hollows and up so many creeks and everything else. I never could figure it out. And then I heard about co-ops.
Yeah.
And it was people who didn't basically look at anything except the service they needed. And they gathered as a co-op and was able to take it at the lowest cost. Is that type of a model still available for broadband when we can't get the big guys to go because they said, well, there's no return on investment. So why are you forcing me to go up this hollow or down this road here and there's only 5 people?
I think we have a perfect analog with the Rural Electrification Act. I mean, there was a time where we thought we could only bring electricity to the cities. You weren't going to turn the lights on in parts of rural West Virginia.
There's not that many rural co-ops still left.
And what we did was we mapped where electricity was and was not, and then we identified where commercial actors could take it, and where commercial actors wouldn't take it, we developed public-private partnerships to deploy in those communities.
So we can identify some areas ourselves where they just cannot get service. I mean, I'm sure that all of us here have that same problem. And if we can identify that to where you will assist and help them put collective together.
Absolutely. What you have to be mindful of is some state laws prevent some of those municipal deployments, and you need to make sure that the state legislature does not stop those activities from happening. But, you know, history shows that when we didn't have barns or roads or bridges, we came together as communities to build them.
Sure.
This, to me, feels exactly the same.
Well, we got one shot because we put a lot of money at it right now, and if we don't follow through, we'll not have it.
You're right. The BEAD program is a once-in-a-lifetime kind of effort.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator Manchin. And as Chair Rosenworcel said,